Christ Triumphant, a devotional of Ellen G. White. Forward. The general theme of this book is the great controversy between Christ and Satan. Every person is involved in it. Ellen White was personally reminded of this when she suffered a stroke of paralysis at the age of 30 as she was about to write out her first account of the vision she had been given at Lovett's Grove, Ohio, in March 1858. The Lord told her that the paralysis was an attempt by Satan to kill her, so she could not write what she had seen. The little book of 219 pages that she produced that year, based on this vision, is Spiritual Gifts, Volume 1, which today can be found as part of early writings. This marked the beginning of a lifetime of writing on the controversy theme that was to continue to the last year of her life as she completed Prophets and Kings. The Great Controversy theme is well covered in the 5 books of Conflict of the Ages series. This devotional book complements these major works. It begins where the Great Controversy began, with Lucifer in heaven. It traces that controversy through to the end. The entry for January 1 comes from the first page of Patriarchs and Prophets, and the last entry for December 31 is found in the last pages of the Great Controversy. It is interesting to note that the first and last phrases are identical. God is love. Nearly 90% of this book has been drawn from Ellen White's letters, sermons, and manuscripts. Portions of these materials will be familiar to frequent readers of her books, as some extracts have been used in many compilations prepared since her death. These compilations include devotional books that have been published during the last 50 years. Other materials can be found in manuscript releases, volumes 1 to 21, and in Sermons and Talks, volumes 1 and 2. In general, the text for each day's devotional study has been taken from King James Version of the Bible. This was the version most used by Ellen White, though occasionally she used others. The prophets whom God inspired to write the books of the Bible used the languages of their day, Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek, but these languages were not understood by all, hence the translations were needed. To make the Old Testament available to people unacquainted with Hebrew and Aramaic, Jewish scholars several centuries before the time of Christ produced a Greek version known as the Septuagint. From this beginning, the scriptures have been translated into more than 1,000 languages, and beyond that, numerous versions have been produced in a single language. Among the English language versions, the New Revised Standard Version, NRSV, uses gender-inclusive language without in any way changing the meaning of the text. A few of the scripture texts for the daily devotionals in this book have been selected from this version. Like the Bible writers, Ellen White used the language of her day. However, writing styles change, as do meanings of words. Thus, when the Comprehensive Index to the Writings of Ellen G. White was published in 1963, a glossary of obsolete and little-used words and terms with altered meanings, which was included at the end of Volume 3. The purpose was to help readers understand better what Mrs. White was saying. In her times, words like such as he, man, men, and mankind were accepted as generic terms that included both men and women. Today, this is not so common. Thus, without making any change in Mrs. White's thought, this devotional book uses gender-inclusive language. As an example, note the February 12 reading. The difference between a good person and a wicked person is not always caused by natural goodness of disposition. The original reads, the difference between a good man and a wicked man is not always caused by natural goodness of disposition. In the February 3 reading, note that the line that begins, as the years of human beings have decreased and their physical strength has diminished, so their mental capacities have lessened. The original reads, as the years of man have decreased and his physical strength has diminished, so his mental capacities have lessened. It is our prayer that this devotional book will help every reader be better prepared for the second coming of Christ and be among those who in eternity will enjoy the fruits of Christ's victory in the great controversy. Written by the trustees of the Ellen G. White Estates. Christ Triumphant, a devotional of Ellen G. White. January. Conflict in heaven and in the first family. January 1. God is love. 1 John 4 verse 16. God is love, and he that dwelleth in love dwelleth in God, and God in him. God is love. His nature, his law, is love. It has ever been, it ever will be. The high and lofty one that inhabiteth eternity, whose ways are everlasting, changeth not. With him is no variableness, neither shadow of turning. Isaiah 57 verse 15, Habakkuk 3 verse 6, James 1 verse 17. Every manifestation of creative power is an expression of infinite love. The sovereignty of God involves fullness of blessing to all created beings. The history of the great conflict between good and evil, from the time it first began in heaven to the final overthrow of rebellion and the total eradication of sin, is also a demonstration of God's unchanging love. The sovereign of the universe was not alone in his work of beneficence. He had an associate, a co-worker who could appreciate his purposes and could share his joy in giving happiness to created beings. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Christ, the Word, the only begotten of God, was one with the eternal Father, one in nature, in character, in purpose, the only being that could enter into all the counsels and purposes of God. The Father wrought by his Son in the creation of all heavenly beings. By him were all things created, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created by him and for him. The Son, the anointed of God, the express image of his person, the brightness of his glory, upholding all things by word of his power, holds supremacy over them all. The law of love, being the foundation of the government of God, and the happiness of all intelligent beings, depends upon their perfect accord with great principles of righteousness. God desires from all his creatures the service of love, service that springs from an appreciation of his character. He takes no pleasure in a forced obedience, and to all he grants freedom of will, that they may render him voluntary service. Patriarchs and Prophets, pages 33-34.